When I last left off on this whole build, I was trying to get my LEDs installed, and as we know, it didn't work all that well, as the LED kit I'd bought just wasn't going to function with this case, or in general, because it didn't have the proper transformer. I have over here another LED kit, and what's interesting about this one is it will work with my motherboard. This is a WS128B, I believe this is. Let me actually just double check that here. That's a... Yes, that's actually a WS2812B. This is what's unique about this is that it's controlled by the motherboard I'm going to use itself. It actually meets those specifications, so I can avoid having to have a whole of the transformers stuffed in here. All of this will get handled by the motherboard and basically leave me one last thing I have to worry about wiring. So I'm going to install this. I've already checked my motherboard's connection for it is going to be on the side of where I just installed this fan. Let's get going on that. Again, I just slide this up. I love this case. This is again why I stick with this old style case. Just pull it's all high quality. Just pull the right section right up on you. Get full access so we can get more access in here. That's again the front drive bay for the 5¼ inch drives. Another thing I did locate, if you remember, I had to install that fan I installed on the side of the case right over here on the side. Came out pretty well, but now I need to have some way of controlling the fan as the automatic sensor just isn't going to reach. So I initially was going to be stuck with something like this, which would have taken up one of the few PCI slots I have on this case. Again, a micro ATX case doesn't have much in the way of those slots. Then I rummaged around and found this guy here. This is a 5¼ inch bay style, or 3½ inch bay, I think, but I'll put adapter rails on it, style fan controller, which will go right into the front of the case and solve my problem. I just have to get myself some adapter plates, so that's something else I'll have to see if I have to put in. Anyway, the first thing to do tonight, though, is to get that LED kit I just showed you in place. Go grab that again and get started on this. Okay, now with this out of the way, I can now I'm going to now open this case up and see exactly how it works. Never actually did an RGB wiring before. I've had lit cases, but they were usually illuminated by an internal light that I just wired in, a basic LED strip or something else, never RGB. Okay, we have our adapters right here, it looks like, to make all this work. Looks like it doesn't matter where I put this because I have enough cable to just run it any way I'd like. Cable's going to be on the left side where the fan is, just to remind myself. And I'm going to put this as I imagined, which would be, I guess, around the side. Yeah, around the top I want it to go, so let's just do that and keep it right where it needs to be. So I'll go, that's where that cable's going to wind up. I'm going to put it on this side where there is no fan to use it most efficiently. Got to be careful not to pull this too hard here. Going to line it into the groove along the top of my case. Bit of a pain to get in there, but I think I know what I'm doing, sort of. There we go. Oh yeah, that'll work perfectly. Gotta be careful to keep it out of the track. Actually, yeah, let's go lower with this, actually. Luckily, this is pretty forgiving. Let's go down a little lower. Not right to the plate itself, so I'm clear of anything. I loved her. Go back a little bit more, actually. Thinking, yeah, right around there. I don't want to trap anything underneath these wires because I'm going to have that stupid assembly coming through the top over there. Oh wait a minute, that ain't going to work. Because my power supply has to go right in there. Good grief. Okay, so I have to go lower down. I think I'll go down. Yeah, that'll block it too. Oh dear. Okay, that's all in place there. I think that'll fit. Now, the big test. Can I put my drive assembly back in place? Okay, this is going to be fun. Will this go in? Will this fit? Of course, it's already having a little trouble fitting in there because it was kind of bent when I got it. I think that's going to do it. Okay, that's sort of in. Make sure my screws are all lined up. This is still not letting it go all the way through. What's holding this thing up? I know this wire isn't doing it now. Oh, wait a minute. Or is it? No, it's not. That wire is clearly clear. So what? Won't this? Oh, there it goes. It worked. Ah, oh, finally. Now, what did I break doing that? Anything? It finally let itself go in. I just want to make sure I didn't ruin anything in the process of this. No computer cases were harmed in the making of this film, I hope. Possibly. Okay. Okay. So that's in now. Why? Now I need to know what's causing this not to go all the way in. This case, I think, has gotten a little deformed after sitting around for a while, which I think is part of my problem here. London by top. Okay, come on, get in here. That's gone. Okay, that's in. And will it slide in position? Well, let us see. My goodness, great. Oh, goodness gracious. Unbelievable. I think I should have... Yeah, I think I'm going to have to turn this whole thing around and try the other way around. Doing the hokey pokey with this damn thing. Thing is really not letting me off easy, is it? Where I'm going to destroy this thing before I even get it mounted. Boy. Okay. There we go, let's go up there. There we go. That's it. There we go. Yes, finally. So what I did now is, to make this fit, is I went ahead and tucked that wire in on the corner over here, as you can see. I went ahead and tucked this all the way into the side. I'm going to push it in here as far as possible. There's a little gap in the top there. That'll keep it nice and isolated. There. And will that work? Yes, it will. It looks like it will. For some reason, it's still not going in all the way. What's it getting caught on again? Yeah, that's actually in. It was actually in before, it looks like. I didn't even need to do this. But anyway, I put a very good custom job in there now. That should look pretty cool now with that light going down as such. It's in, I think, right? Let's just make sure this is just the fitment that's causing the problem here, nothing else. Well, I see what's doing it. It's this stupid lock here. There it is. That's what was holding it up. That stupid plastic tab. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, okay, it's in. Yep, okay, so that's in now. That's how I'm gonna do it. Took a little while, and I kind of figured this was gonna be a bit of a nightmare, but it was. Anyway, so I got this light in. Don't know how well the video came out. Hopefully I won't have to do too much in post here, but if I do, I do. So anyway, we got this done now. I got the wiring out. Now I have to figure out how... Now it's time to get down to the meat and potatoes of this build, which I will go into. First, I just want to straighten some of this wiring up. This, again, is the wire extension thing that's going to let me hook up to my... motherboard. What I'm going to do here is, as you see, I've tucked the wire now underneath here. There are two fans that run on top here. I've tucked the wire. If we take a look right into here, it's kind of hard to see, but this little shelf here is where I've tucked the wire underneath, and I've put it in to where the two fans are. But I'll give you a better shot here. Let me take you off the tripod for a second. If we take a look down here, my fans are located right on the base here. What I've done is I've tucked the wire underneath this little plastic piece of metal, I should say, and I've tucked it now through in between the two fans and down along here, where there's nothing that will interfere with it. I can then in turn run it right to the motherboard, so it'll run very cleanly across. So keep the airflow efficient. Okay, now time to get to the meat and potatoes of this build. And now for the meat and potatoes of this build, and that basically means the motherboard and anything that goes onto the motherboard that essentially makes up what this computer is. We'll start with the motherboard itself. It's an X570M Pro 4. This is from ASRock. Now, I don't really like this brand very much. I've had a lot of problems with them. In fact, I don't think I've ever had one of these that actually worked the way it was supposed to, ever. They've always been a problem for me. I've never had good luck with them. But I still went for it for a couple of reasons. The first reason was the fact that it has PCI Express 4.0 support. Now, I don't know how well that's going to show up on here. In fact, I'll zoom in a little bit more. What this is the support for the newer type PCI Express interfaces, which works with your graphics card and with solid-state drives. Bottom line, this means a quicker interface, less latency, faster responses, quicker loading times, better game performance, etc. Since this is going to be an editing and gaming PC, that's not a bad move. The second reason why I went with it was that PC Per had done the ATX version of this. They'd given a good review of, so I figured, hey, if they think it's a good product, then it can't be that bad. So I grabbed the MTA ATX version of this. And see, the final reason was I just don't like the idea of using outdated technology with this kind of processor that I went with. It would basically handicap the whole system. I remember back in the day I was on a gaming forum for Test Drive Unlimited, just to see how long ago this was. A guy on there had bought himself a top-of-the-line, then an 8800 GTS graphics card. He got himself a top-of-the-line Intel CPU, but then one of the then not-so-good quality Elite-style motherboards with a really pathetic chipset that was sort of hodgepodged around. And the end result, the computer ran like crap. It never got anything resembling acceptable frame rates despite the crazy specs it had. So bottom line, all those reasons got me to buy this motherboard. Now another thing you'll note on this is that the board is open. Yes, I did open this up, but unfortunately that's how I got it from Amazon. Apparently Amazon thought it was okay to ship this not in an outside box, but in other words with an external box on top of it, but in its own box. As you can see, they simply threw a shipping label on this thing and sent it out. That's essentially what they did, and unfortunately when it arrived, it was unsealed and completely open, which I particularly didn't care for, but I'm kind of committed to using it now, and I'm going to try it. If it doesn't work, I'm covered under their return policy, and I'm good with that. At least I hope I am. Over here we have the rest of the components. I have my SATA drive. This again supports an M.2 NVMe. You can't really see much, and I'm not taking this out because it's a remanufactured drive from Best Buy. It's a Samsung, I think that's a 950 Samsung Evo NVMe drive, 1 terabyte of memory capacity, again NVMe for maximum speed interface. It's the quicker version of M.2 for those of you who are not familiar. Very respectable, very respectable, and very much recommended if you're trying to build a system. This will be for fast storage. For slow storage, I went the cheapest I could. This is an enterprise drive from Seagate. It's an enterprise class style drive. It's got 6 terabytes of capacity on it. Works just fine. Fine for what I'm doing. Not exactly quick, but again, it's for bulk storage. Nothing I need quickly. Like the OS won't be on there. It'll just be like slower moving games and video files for editing videos, etc. There's things I don't need to access 100% fast, just basically bulk storage. The actual project files will be on the NVMe. The next thing I needed was, of course, RAM, and I got 2 sticks of this. Again, you want to keep your RAM matched so it doesn't cause a hardware conflict or has at least less of a chance of that. I went with ballistics. There's a 16 gigs of 3200 megahertz RAM from Ballistic. Each one of these are 16 gigabytes. The previous system only had 16 gigabytes total, so this will bring me up to a total of 32 gigabytes on this unit. Pretty impressive. And finally, we have my processor, the piece de resistance, a Ryzen 7 3200X, I believe this is, no, pardon me, 3700X. Brand new processor, just picked this, I got this off the shelf from Best Buy with some deals I had running, and this will really make it breathe well. The previous processor I might add is a 9700, is a high-end Core i7 4000 series running at 3 gigahertz. 4790K, I think that I'm replacing it with. That was a 4-core processor. It has an 88, and I think that's an 88 watt TDP. This one has 8 cores and is only a 65 or yeah, I think it is a 65 TDP watt TDP. In short, this has more cores, more performance, and it is significantly faster than the one it's replacing, and it uses far less power in the process. So very impressive overall. So now it's time to get everything together. The first step I'm going to do is to actually get the motherboard tray out of the case. And I'm going to move it over to my other work area, and I'm going to start assembling all the components into the motherboard itself, and then I'll be ready to actually mount the motherboard and everything else in place. Okay, and as we notice here, I actually had a second LED set up with that kit. I went ahead and actually installed it on the floor of the computer to give a little bit more light. This area here won't have anything mounting here. The motherboard tray stops right there, so it'll fit perfectly. But anyway, as you can see, this is what I did with it. I just went along the bottom and around the base right there. It hooks in right through the back line, right along the front, and right onto the bottom right there. So that'll work fine. The top piece I know clears that. As we see, that's as it has to go to the top of the fan, so that'll work just perfectly for what it is. This should all fit perfectly in place. I'll just double check that now. And after messing around with the fit a little bit more, it slides beautifully into place. You see those holes line up beautifully, which means I have a perfect fit now on this thing. Something I couldn't say before. So I'm not sure exactly how I managed to pull this off. I'm not sure what was holding it up before. Maybe it was just a little bit bent. Whatever the case, it's in place now. It's working. Not exactly sure what I did to make it fit so well, but it works. And that's all I care about. So it looks like we're good to move on to the next step, which is to build the motherboard. Okay, the first step in building any motherboard, at least for me it is to install this I/O shield. What essentially this does is protect the I/O or input-output on the back of the motherboard from interference with other radio signals, etc. Basically stop you from getting noise on the screen, and by noise I mean static, etc. Very critical piece that's often overlooked, although you could overlook it literally. Anyway, to install it is pretty simple. I'm just going to take this piece, turn my motherboard tray, which is what I have in front of me, around, and put it in, making sure to assemble it in the way it's supposed to be. Goes in like that. This is actually going to go in from the rear. It's been a while since I did this, as you can probably tell. So now I'm going to aim this down a bit more. Now basically I'm going to line this little guy up here and push it into position. As such. There we go. Clicks in. It's just held in place by a few different snapping points. I want to make sure you get all of these areas snapped in, including this side area here. Make sure it's in perfectly straight, because again the board is going to slide up against this, and if it's going to go in, it has to fit perfectly. There it is. Shove that last piece in, and I'm ready now to get the motherboard over here.
And now on to mounting the CPU and preparing the motherboard for installation inside the case. As again, this is an X570M motherboard. We can see it's compact for what it is. There's the CPU socket right there. We also see it has the two mounts on the side there to actually install the heatsink itself. And don't forget to touch the screw in the middle of an outlet before you proceed to ground yourself. I'd love to say I'm just testing you with this next clip here as I install the CPU and everything else. Unfortunately, what you are seeing, and yes, you're right to guess this, I am making a colossal goof. Unlike the previous generation Ryzen that I installed, which was I believe it was a first gen Ryzen, this particular version of the core does not require you to remove these particular mounts. It actually utilizes them, so please don't do as I'm doing here, learn from my mistakes. And now the moment which at least a lot of you have been waiting for, the actual installation of the processor itself. The first step I like to do is to make sure I have my orientation correct on it, that is to say, figure out which direction it goes inside the socket. There's only one way to do it, if not you can bend the pins. So if we take a look very carefully, there is a gold little pointer, or arrow I should say, on the side of the processor as I zoom in here to show you. Identify that first is what my procedure is. I'm not going to install it just yet. I'm just figuring out what the orientation is so I don't have to mess with that later on. And also just to demonstrate where the difference is to everyone. Once you have identified said arrow, open the socket by pulling up on the lever on the side, as you see me doing right there. Then carefully rotate the processor into position and let it drop into place, a very small height. Do not press down on the processor. It should fall in by itself. If it doesn't gently pick it up. Do not apply any pressure. Make sure you lift it up clear before you rotate it. Rotate it then, and basically keep doing it until you get the right orientation. You'll know as the processor will drop down a few inches when you place it into the socket itself. Once it's in place correctly, take the arm you see on the right again, after making sure very closely that it is in place, and press the arm back down to lock it back in place. And there you have it. We've installed the processor. Now it's time to install the heatsink, and as we see here, I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit. Now it's time to install the actual heatsink cooler itself using the old school mounting system that harkens back to the early days of PC building. The first step is to remove the plastic guard underneath the actual CPU cooler itself, which will allow the heatsink compound that's already been pre-applied to attach with the processor. Then, as you just saw me do, connect the fan header to the actual fan connection on the motherboard, the fan cable I should say, to the fan connection. Then find the right orientation to where both of those mounts line up with the two mounting points, and then apply pressure to get them into place. The way to begin this is to take the longer one and connect it first for an easier hookup, and then have the shorter one and then clamp the shorter one in once you have the first one in its located state. Next, we fit the shorter, more difficult to place arm in position on the mount itself. Remember that the actual tension between the CPU head and the actual cooler head is what's allowing the heat to transfer from the CPU itself onto the CPU cooler, and thus be pushed out, and thus allow the CPU cooler, I should say, to do its job of cooling off the processor. Once we have the clamp in place, we pull down on the lever to get the proper torque applied to the CPU cooler and lock it into place securely above the CPU itself.
There it is, finally. Oh. Whew.
Now with the CPU cooler successfully installed and properly installed, it's time to connect the CPU cooler's LED system. One of the features of all the Ryzen 5 and 7 style processors is that they all contain LED lighting for the CPU cooler. So if you have a see-through or transparent case like the one I have, you're in for a treat. We note that the CPU gets its own dedicated LED header on the motherboard. Please note the tiny little arrow that you'll see me pointing to in just a second. This is very critical as it actually points out the orientation of the connection. Putting it in backwards can destroy the LEDs or even cause a problem with the motherboard, so it is very critical to make sure these two arrows line up against each other. But first we'll locate the actual connection on the CPU cooler for the LED header itself. Please note that if your motherboard does not have an LED header for the CPU cooler, there is an alternative cable provided with these processors, with the CPU cooler I should say, that will let you connect it to a standard connection off the motherboard. I believe it utilizes one of the USB plugins or one of the fan plugins depending upon which one you have.
There we go. There it is, it's in, I think. Okay.
And finally, as mentioned before, we'll locate the actual LED header on the motherboard itself, aligning the two arrows with each other, and then carefully make sure they're connected correctly. Next, I'm going to mount the motherboard to the actual motherboard tray, which slides inside the case. Note it's not necessary to do it at this particular time, but in my case, to keep the clutter to a minimal and to keep things together, I figured it just made more sense. Once the motherboard is safely on the tray and all the screw holes line up with each other, it's time to actually secure it down by utilizing utilizing the standard motherboard case screws. Please note that your case will include these screws. In some cases there will be extras. It's a good idea to hang on to those extras, as you never know when one will get stripped out or when you may need one in the future. Trust me, it's happened, but to me before, in fact several times. After removing a few screws from the bag itself, it is now time to start using them to attach the motherboard to the motherboard tray. It's as simple as it sounds. After confirming that all the holes are lined up, simply insert the screw into the hole and screw it down. Once again, folks, please do not forget to ground thyself before proceeding with this next part. Next, it's time to install the RAM. Note the little RAM sockets and these little points in the middle. This is a special corresponding divot that must correspond to a divot made inside the RAM stick itself. To install the RAM, we simply line this divot up with the RAM stick itself and follow the instructions on our motherboard to see exactly how they should be installed for dual channel mode. Dual channel mode would enable the memory to work through two sticks at the same time, using two different channels, allowing for more efficient utilization of memory. In this case, I believe we're going through triple channel mode, but because I have two different slots being used instead of three, we're going to stay with dual channel for this particular setup. Next, I'm going to install the SSD. Please note that I actually made a mistake here. The actual SSD installation should occur next to where it wound up going, underneath that heatsink mount-like thing with the fan grill on the top. Unfortunately, I didn't realize this at the time and installed it next to it. This is something I would fix later on in this particular video, so I'm going to skip through most of the install. What I will point out is it's the same standard install as usually with these. Simply mounted it at the angle, lined up the one divot with the divot inside the slot. Again, making sure it's at a 90-degree angle or so facing up. Then find the screw included with the kit. Gently apply pressure to get it to sit down, and turn the screw to tighten it down. Please note that while the SSD would work just fine in that other slot, it would lack the cooling and other performance enhancements gained by being in the main slot where the heatsink is. That's the reason why I moved it over later on. Next, it's time to slide the motherboard and assembly all together and ensure that everything goes in correctly. Please note that this is a particularly challenging task with this particular type of case, as there's very little room inside. Therefore, all the wires must have extra wire around them to allow them to slide in and out of the case, as there is no way of servicing some of the motherboard components without sliding the motherboard back. So it is very critical at this point to take my time and make sure everything fits just as it should.
Okay, as you saw from that last video, if I didn't make it clear, or I will now, I've got a bit of a problem here. You see this big hole back here? That's where my power supply is supposed to go. And if we see here, my heatsink is literally just underneath that. There, so it's not going to have much room to breathe. So that leads me to a bit of an issue. I have to either A, find a smaller power supply to keep this as open as possible, to allow as much air through as possible, and or B, get a more compact heatsink. Now again, I didn't pay anything for the heatsink. It came with the processor, so it's not such a loss in my opinion, though it would be nice to avoid spending the cash. And I can probably get away with dropping it down to a smaller heatsink, since this is actually only a 65 watt TDP style processor for its 8 cores, which is the incredible thing. Nonetheless, though, I have to make a decision. So here are the options I have. The original one I was going to go with is, well, I'll give them to you in order. They're sitting right here on my bed. Over here we have an 850M, which I was looking at very closely. This is the one I was thinking of going with. I've had this piled up for a while, as it was for another project, or I bought it on sale. I can't remember what. But whenever I see a sale or something really cheap, I'll grab one and just keep it as a spare. You never know when you're going to need one. And from where I live, finding a power supply means a long drive. So I'd rather have it. Anyway, so I'd rather have one on hand, and rather than ship something in, which also takes ridiculously long because of how rural I am. So anyway, that's one option. This massive 850. It's a semi-modular power supply. That is to say that not all the plugs are permanently mounted to it, but things like the CPU power source and the main motherboard power source and a few of the other cables are permanently wound into a sort of sheathed cable. Then over here we have another one. This is, I actually bought this thinking of this computer in mind. This is a 750 megawatt RM power supply series, a little bit more compact than this one below it. Though it's supposed to be, but it looks actually bigger. That's another possibility. Maybe again, this is a fully modular power supply, so I can control what cables come out of it. Again, it might be too big for my application. Then we have this little guy here. Those of you remember my Apple projects, I actually did another one of these, and I bought myself an extra one. This is an SF600 style power supply, short for small form factor. And it might actually be the thing that can save my bacon, because it doesn't take very much space to mount in place. It's also open, so I'm thinking I'm going to try this first and see if it fits. The only thing that draws back is that the FS600, it keeps messing up on that pronunciation, only has 600 watts to show for itself. But then again, this processor is only a 65 TDP, so it shouldn't actually be too bad. So, I'll give this a try and see if it fits. Again, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I have extra power supplies here. My main goal right now is just to test to see how well this works, if it does. Again, we have all my wires here nicely cabled up. Here are the wires. It looks like I didn't touch this. I thought for sure I'd messed with this because the plastic is off, but apparently not. Okay, power supply. Here we go. Really compact 600 megawatt power supply. Let's see what it does. I want to see, my goal is to try to keep that hole as least obscured as possible, so as much air can flow through as possible. So, you can see how tiny this thing is. Wow. So, this should not be a problem in terms of not obscuring this. I'm thinking I might be able to just get away with doing this, and that would definitely allow everything to work. Oh yeah, look at that. Let me actually take you off the tripod for a second. This actually looks very promising in terms of the way it looks right now. As you can see right down there, the fan is not really obscured at all. It's pretty well accessible. Yeah, this could actually work if I can mount it in here. The only catch is, again, design flaws rear its ugly head. This is not designed to take something so compact, but then again, if I drilled holes into the case, I guess I could make it fit. But there's no way to mount the top hole, so I'd have to create an adapter bracket on the top, or see if someone makes one for this thing. I think I actually have in the kit thinking about an adapter bracket for this type of power supply. If I could get that in and either push this mounting point in the bottom higher up, or better yet, bring the mounting point in the top further down, that could fix my problem, and I would have a perfect place to mount my power supply, and that would in turn get rid of the issue with this. The only problem is my maximum wattage on this power supply is a whopping 600, but then again, considering the lower TDP, I think I can get away with it. Well, anyway, let me see what I can do on that.
Now, as it turns out here, I would go through a lot of unnecessary work in making an adapter to fill the gap that the X600, or SX600 I should say, created in the case, as I would wind up having to upgrade to an SX700, which would provide, or 750 I think it was, that would provide the necessary wattage but would also come with an adapter. So I'm going to skip through most of this, even though there was some excellent metal fabrication on my part myself. I will of course show you the finished result.
Okay, just to recap what I did, as you can see, I've gone a little bit further now. I've taken a pair of universal shears, as they call them, metal shears, and cut these two pieces apart. So now I'm going to take this one and get this little notch out and make it long enough to fit the top part so I can cover that whole top expanse of the power supply area. I do this by simply tightening it up with the vice grips and then bending it back accordingly. This is not very thick metal, so it's very easy to bend. Probably a better idea to use gloves in this method, but there we go. We take a look there. It's now pretty much in shape. This is going to be very flimsy metal, but I don't need it to support a ton. I just need it to fit in there. Okay, so I'll keep taking a look at this and keep going over it and making sure I get something I need that it actually will fit that piece, that place, and I'll keep going from there. Okay, here's what's happened so far on this. As you see, I've put my custom mount on one side in place. About to do the top one right now. What I did here on these holes on both of them, I went ahead and grabbed a 3/32 drill and drilled a pilot hole out. And I'm going to use the self-tapping metal screw like I did down here to go ahead and drill the rest of it in. So this way I get a perfect fit. I don't have to worry about much else. Figure out how I had this. Oh yeah, it was like this. This will overlap on the top better yet, so if there's any space exposed, it'll take care of that. Looks like I could have actually used the other hole, but actually no, that wouldn't have worked because it was overlapping there. Alright, let me just get this lined up as best I can. Attach my screw into the hole, get it started, and then start screwing it in place. Kind of crude, but it'll do the trick. I can always upgrade this later on. And it's going to be a little tricky to get this in because this screw has to physically tap. This is very thin metal, but it still nonetheless has to tap. The screw is designed to tap itself. Hence the reason why it's called self-tapping. That is to say, it puts the threads into the metal itself for the screw to grip onto. I'm going to hold on to this until it gets into position because if not, it's going to slip because that's an incomplete hole. There we go. Alrighty, and that will sort of do it. Not bad. So I did it's a crude attachment, admittedly, but it'll do the job. It's not going anywhere there. It's nice and secure. Power supply kind of acts structural to it. What I think I want to do is eventually add another screw here. Maybe even, I think I can actually put another one in here maybe and just like kind of wedge it in there with a screw. Try that later on maybe. So anyway, that takes care of this. So the hole is now blocked. It's a little bit on the crude side, but it'll do the trick. I think what I may do eventually is drill into the hole right where this rubber section is, right through it, and do a pilot hole through that and maybe do something else. But I don't want to risk getting metal particles into this case, so it'd be a bit of a pain. So I think I'll just leave this for right like that right now. That'll do fine because it's resting on top of each other. So yeah, that'll work fine. Okay, so my SF600 is now in place. Now I'm going to start plumbing this, as we call it. So part of me wants to drill this out as a hole, so I think what I'll do is I'll mark this out to have a hole drilled, and I'll do it a little later. Right about there through the bevel. And at some point I'll get to drilling that out, depending on if I keep this or not. But anyway, that'll do for now. So right now, as you see, I managed to fabricate this whole place. I'm very happy with how that came out. Next, what I'm going to do here is, after I figure out this, I'm going to go ahead and now try plumbing this power supply and see if I have a running computer. Because again, I don't even know that. All I've done is set it. Okay, I'm going to do this in free camera mode. I now have it all hooked up. I have a power running into my Surge over here. I'm going to go see if she kicks over. I'm just going to use the onboard graphics to this test. I don't have a graphics card yet for this computer. Again, I'm looking to just make sure it works before I do anything else. Anyway, let's find the front panel connection and spark it and see what happens. This is a bit on the unorthodox way of starting things, but again, I don't know if I'm even keeping the same setup, so I'm not going to bother wiring all that in just to take it out again. See here, CMOS, where is that? No, I saw a front panel connector someplace on this heap. Oh, here it is, right here. See what she does. Nothing. There we go. Whoop. Didn't expect that to kick over so suddenly. Fans are on full blast right now because I don't have a fan controller in it. Waiting for a post. And see, wow, look at that. LEDs do not appear to be lit up, but I think I have to program those before they'll work. I do have power from my rear fans and everything else. Okay, it's doing something. The lights are oh, actually no, that's just the effects right now kicking in. As it turns out, my power supply actually has some LED effects built into it, it appears. That's pretty cool. I didn't even realize that. Still waiting for a post here. Nothing came up on the screen as of yet. It's not a good sign. Might have the RAM in the wrong way. Let me try restarting it, cutting the power and turning it back on again. Okay, take two. I've now moved one of the RAM DIMMs over. I think I had it in the wrong slot. I'm hoping that was the problem. Anyway, let's go ahead and spark again and get her to kick over. There we go. See if we get a post now. Again, the front fan here is always going to be on full blast because I can't adjust the fan because I don't have an adjustment in just yet. See what goes on over here. I think it's going to be another no post. Monitor is on, just to confirm. Oh, hold it. That actually might be a good sign. The system's resetting itself. Oh, look at that. The LEDs have come alive. That didn't happen before, so that's definitely a good sign, but I still don't have a post here. That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. So I got one good sign. Oh, there it goes again. It's resetting itself. It's getting kind of weird here. I'm hoping this motherboard was not damaged in shipment. As far as I know, everything else is good. Oh, wait a minute. Did I see the color change? No, it's still amber, which means sleep mode for that Lenovo monitor. Lights look pretty impressive inside there, I gotta say. I just hope I can get it to do more than just flash its lights and actually get a picture on the darn screen. There it goes again. All the LEDs are active, so very clearly the motherboard is not dead. It's just having a hard time posting. If it wasn't, these LEDs would not be flashing, so that is good news. And they really are bright. this is power supplies enough, although it shouldn't be. I'm not running anything much. I just got the basics to get it going. I should be able to get a post out of this, shouldn't I? There it goes again. Luckily, I don't have any hard drives hooked in. I'll let this try a few more times. If it keeps doing this, I'll have to assume that something's wrong and abort this whole attempt. Okay, after consulting, please do pardon me, I am free camming it. After consulting the diagnostic lights, which you're probably not going to be able to see down here, which there are a few that basically say CPU, RAM, DRAM, and graphic and VGA. I noticed that every light is coming on except VGA, which leads me to believe that this particular system, processor, I should say, either A, doesn't have an onboard graphics, or B, the motherboard simply isn't function. Motherboard's onboard graphics don't work. But I'm thinking the former is the more likely the issue. So what I did is I went ahead and put a crappy little 1070 underneath, 710 underneath the hood, GeForce 710, pardon me, right there. I'll go ahead and see if that'll make any differences. Let's go and spark this again.
While I don't have footage of it, I did eventually get it to start, as it turns out that I didn't have it turns out that to be a memory configuration that was the issue that was preventing the unit from starting, and I do believe that that graphics card didn't in fact exist on this particular CPU. Whatever the case, I got it to fire up, and as you'll see in for a brief second at the end of this first part of this video, there is a picture of the unit posting for just a few seconds. Not sure what happened to the rest of it. All I can think of is my camera ran out of film. So anyway, I'll pick this up on the next part. Have a good evening, folks, and yeah, that part's coming right up for you.